So I had a lot of internal conflict, struggle within me, if you will, when I was kind of finalizing all my ideas and thoughts for this Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild review. So in general, when I review games, I try to take each game by itself at face value. I push aside all previous notions of previous games, how storied the franchise is, all recency bias, and I feel that's the best way to give you guys an honest interpretation of my final thoughts. But at the same time I was thinking about it, if you buy a game with the title Super Mario or Metal Gear Solid, or in this case The Legend of Zelda, you come in with some sort of expectations inevitably that you want to be fulfilled or met. So here's the rub, here's the deal. The Legend of Zelda by itself is a fantastic, incredible game, but it's not a great Zelda game. It loses a lot of the magic that has made the franchise as memorable as and as long running as it is. But despite not resonating with traditional Zelda fans, it still offers an amazing, incredible gameplay experience that probably is going to make it one of the better games of 2017. More of my controversial thoughts following this review. So let's start off with the narrative or the story, and it's the exact same story we've been playing for the last 30 years, and if you came in expecting anything else, then that's just, it's on you, shame on you. It's the same old, there's a princess, you need to defeat a guy named Ganon, you rescue her, you save the kingdom of Hyrule, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Link remains the silent hero that we've grown to love for the last 3 decades, but one small change they made is that they invested a little bit more into the character of Princess Zelda, to a point where, I'll be honest, I didn't even want to rescue her at the very beginning of the game because I just didn't like her. I didn't like her attitude, I didn't like her treatment of Link. She was really stuck up, but as you progress through the game and you discover all the cutscenes as well as find some of the hidden optional memories throughout the game, which is something I actually encourage you to do because it actually impacts the ending, you steadily grow to like her a little bit and you grow to empathize with her. But probably the biggest failing of the story in Breath of the Wild is that it makes the biggest sin that you can in a video game, in that it never makes the main villain recognizable. It never makes you actually hate Ganon as a character. You actually hate, I personally, myself, I ended up hating some of Link's allies more than I ended up hating Ganon, just because you actually never encounter him till the very end. Spoiler alert, you have to fight Ganon at the end of Breath of the Wild. And when you do fight him, there's very little interaction between Link, Zelda, and him. And especially if you take into account previous games such as Ocarina of Time or A Link Between Worlds. The story in Zelda games have never always been that in-depth, but in those games you have a clear sight of who the villain is, and you encounter him enough that you actually grow to slightly hate him. But in this game, it's not the case. You kind of just go through the motions of what exactly you're supposed to be doing as a hero, and you just beat him at the end, and you kind of are left feeling empty when you do so. Alright, so let's talk about gameplay now, which is definitely the biggest strength of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and probably the greatest departure from the traditional series, and in all the best ways. So you have this huge, massive open world where you can freely explore at your leisure, where you can pretty much do anything you can think of. If you think you can do it, you can most likely do it. If you want to climb, go climb it. If you want to chop down a tree, go do it. If you want to cook something, have at it. If you want to hunt and gather, just go for it. And it really gives you the freedom to define your own adventure of where you want to go, and it does not at any point hinder you. You can pretty much do anything you want at the very beginning of the game, go anywhere you want. It takes a page out of The Legend of Zelda A Link Between Worlds, a 3DS game that came out a couple of years ago. You have open freedom to do anything you want right away. No one item will pigeonhole you to not enter a specific area. Like I said, it's just open freedom in all the best ways. So all the weapons and items that you've grown to love with the franchise pretty much make the return in Breath of the Wild, from bows and arrows to swords to hammers to fire rods to ice rods, are pretty much all there. But the main difference here is that they're no longer the special items in the dungeons that you crawl through and try to solve, but rather you just find them randomly in the wild off random enemies and encounters. And the main difference now is that they all pretty much work on a durability system. You have a set amount of times you can use them before they will literally just shatter in your hands and they'll be gone forever. What's really awesome about this is that it keeps the gameplay so diverse because you're constantly trying to manage your inventory and just sometimes you don't have the right stuff, so you constantly have to experiment with a lot of different things. In past games, what you do is pretty much if you find the Master Sword, you're playing with Master Sword pretty much throughout the rest of the game, unless you have to use a special item to solve a puzzle, and that's pretty much the only time you swap out. But in Breath of the Wild, Master Sword by itself is an optional item. You don't even have to get the Master Sword if you don't want to. It will unlock a lot of cool memories and it'll make the final end game a lot easier for yourself, like a lot easier, but you don't have to do it if you don't want to, which is something that's really cool. And it's almost blasphemy in some sort of way, but I definitely think that it's a positive direction in the series because, like I said, it just keeps things fresh and it keeps things interesting. However, to me, weapons and items have never really defined this series. Don't get me wrong, they help a whole ton. When you think of the Triforce and you think of the Master Sword, you automatically think of The Legend of Zelda. But to me, what really defines the series and makes each game very special are the imaginatively designed dungeons as well as the amazing boss battles that you're going to encounter throughout your entire adventure. But in trying to keep that open world feel where you're basically designing your own adventure and progressing at any pace that you want and basically going anywhere you want in whatever order that you want, the game takes a step back in this part, which really, it hurt a lot. So the dungeons in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild as well as the boss battles are some of the most uninspiring, not only in the series, but basically in most games, because they're pretty much cut and paste copies of each other. Once you do one dungeon and you defeat the boss of that dungeon, you're pretty much doing the exact same thing 4 times over, and it's just, yeah, I know the reason why. I understand why they had to do it this way, but it's just a huge buzzkill when I have to fight the same boss 4 times over again, and pretty much, with slight changes, pretty much doing the exact same dungeon all over again. And each dungeon did not in any way feel unique. The only thing that makes the dungeon unique is basically how you enter them throughout your entire playthrough. Each dungeon requires you to enter them a special way, but once you get inside, like I said, it's pretty much the same mechanics throughout the entire process. For the most part, all the highly imaginative puzzles that give you those patented Zelda aha moments when you finally solve them are saved for optional shrines that you'll discover throughout the entire game. So the shrines basically functions as self-contained mini dungeons pretty much, that you solve in order to increase either your health bar or your stamina bar. And you don't have to do them, just like the rest of the game. They're entirely optional, but all the hidden gems, all those hidden puzzles that really are special to the Zelda games are hidden within these shrines. And it just makes me want to scream, why couldn't you just kind of piece them all together to make one self-contained dungeon with a central theme and a central design? It just was very frustrating, especially when you encountered a really good one. It just, yeah, it's just, the magic is just lost in that sense. And just wrapping up on the topic of dungeons and boss battles, so at the end of each dungeon, you're given a specific power that you can utilize throughout the rest of the game. But the problem with one of the 4 powers is that one of them is grossly overpowered and definitely far and away better than the rest of them, to a point where it actually almost breaks the game. And that once you get it, it makes the game, the rest of the game, especially with the rest of the boss battles, just infinitely easier, to a point where I actually kind of felt bad using it. And just wrapping off with boss battles, the final boss in this game, once again, the first half is pretty much what you have faced throughout your entire game. Once again, cookie cutter bosses, and the final encounter is just, it's flat. It just leaves you wanting more. I just expected more out of Nintendo, honestly, for a game of this scale. For the boss battle, it's just far too easy. I'm pretty sure it would be extremely difficult to fail it, and it's just, yeah, it doesn't offer you much else to it. So yeah. Alright, let's wrap up with graphics and technical of Breath of the Wild, which is by far and away the most controversial area about this game. So let's call a spade a spade. The game does not run well. Either the hardware is not strong enough to support the game, or the game was not optimized well enough, because in heavily wooded areas, mountainous areas, the game takes a steady nosedive in terms of its frame rate, to a point where in some areas the game will actually just lock. The screen will literally just lock for half a second, and after that half second it'll pick up exactly where we left off and pretend like nothing happened. And in modern day gaming, I'm sorry, that's inexcusable. You can't have a game with a frame rate that is like that. And lastly, this is the first Zelda game to introduce voice acting, and it shows a lot. So for the most part, every major character has at least a tiny bit of voice acting dialogue to it. It's generally not performed very well, and it actually inexplicably like starts and stops. So you would have this one scene where it's voice acted the entire way through, and you kind of are expecting it to continue a tiny bit, but it just like inexplicably just stops, and you're kind of just like, at least you tried. So based on everything I said, you probably think I'm gonna give this game like a score out of 5. That I absolutely hated The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. It's a terrible game and you shouldn't play it. It's a waste of money, which is far, far and away from the truth. I absolutely love Breath of the Wild as a standalone game, a game by itself. My main issues with it is that it just loses some of the magic that has made Zelda games so great. In particular, its dungeon design, or lack of dungeon design, as well as its lack of unique boss battles, and the final encounter is just very disappointing. And as well, the game has, let's say it, a ton of technical issues. That it's still an amazing experience the entire way through. The just sheer things that you can do in the open world, and the amount of things that you can do in general, of how you can interact with the open world, is something that I've never experienced before. And it's just, Nintendo still got some magic, even though I think they strayed a little bit away from what has made Zelda great. There's still a lot of magic in the Nintendo universe, and I just really hope moving forward that in the next Zelda game they kind of just reel it back to the traditional roots. And if they can do that, combined with the amazing gameplay in Breath of the Wild, then you definitely have a game that is going to be an instant classic and one of the best games of all time. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for my review of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This is probably going to be the most controversial review that I have ever produced. Let me know what you guys thought of my views in the comment box below, what you agreed with, what you disagreed with. Until then, thank you guys for watching. Like I said, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. As always, if you enjoyed, drop the video a quick thumbs up. And I shall see you guys next time for my next review, which is most likely Mass Effect Andromeda. So it's either done in the playlist or it's coming up in the near future. But until then, as always, have a fantastic day. Don't get me started with the final boss of the game. Ooh, I was just expecting so much more. It was far too easy, and they didn't throw anything new at you that just, yeah, it didn't I can't do this.